A lot of these efforts and the things that we're talking about, this beautiful facility that Ahmad and I were just at, the ATAC facility on 12 Mile, right across from Macomb Community College, what a tremendous asset that is to Macomb County. Boy, as a kid growing up in and around this area, seeing the redevelopment of that from a former Farmer Jack grocery store, which I used to actually buy products from, now into this incredible technology facility, is really a statement for Macomb County. With that being said, a lot of these things could not happen without the educational institution and the involvement of the greatest two-year institution than anywhere else in the country, and I say that not just as a proud alum, but because I truly believe we have got a great facility here in Macomb County. It provides us an opportunity, although some say, why do we not have a four-year institution? I often tell them it's because we have Macomb Community College and the outreach they have with other four-year institutions that bring them here in our own backyard really is a tremendous advantage for others that are seeking educational opportunities. Kids like myself who went to Macomb Community College, got a two-year degree, and ended up getting a bachelor and a master's degree because of the university center right here in my backyard while I was working for a law enforcement agency. This could not be done anywhere else, I believe, in the country, with the exception of Macomb County, and it's because of the talent that we have working at Macomb Community College, which is led by the gentleman who's going to give his 30th annual economic forecast, the president, Dr. Jim Jacobs. Everyone, please help me welcome our president.
You want to put that 30th in there. Thank you, Mark. And thank you all for coming. I really enjoy doing this. I mean, I don't know whether I like the 30-year business, but first of all, I get a chance to learn a lot about the county and really get a chance to interact with a lot of both political leaders, business leaders, community activists in the county. And it's really an honor, to do this kind of talk, because you get a sense of the vibrancy and the growth of this county. And having done this for such a long period of time, I can tell you, since 1984, when this first started, we really have grown quite a bit. I remember the first time we did this talk was on the South Campus of Macomb. We had 3 or 4 tables, etc. Today, there's a couple hundred people here. This gets streamed on through our website to our staff at the college, and it grows each year. And I really want to thank the chambers for having the confidence in us to do this kind of event. Several of you, when I talked to you this week, said, how can you keep doing this forecast? When do you have time to do it? And while I do confess, and I talked to Al Lorenzo this morning a little bit about this, every year, about 2 days before I give the forecast, I go through a kind of identity crisis by saying, why did I do this again? On the other hand, I really have to say that the reason I'm able to do this is that we have a fantastic staff at Macomb Community College who really are talented and skilled and mission-driven, and they really help me and sort of allow me to kind of freelance and do this. The way we're going to do this is, let me start by really introducing the format. And this is the format that we've been using all along. We start with national trends. We move down to the state and county level. We talk about Macomb County issues, give a little bit of the forecast and the wild card. But because I know a lot of you, both might need to leave during the, during the presentation, and because it makes more sense, let me start with the forecast and then drill down, and we'll talk about some of the reasons for that forecast. So, as we enter 2015, the future of the American economy is very, very bright. The actions taken by the Obama administration in 2009 and 2010, along with the Federal Reserve's low interest rates and other policies, have succeeded in stimulating the recovery from the Great Recession. After a tepid beginning in the first quarter of 2014, and those of us who remember the weather in that period, the recovery accelerated in the next 2 quarters with a strong gross domestic product in the third quarter. And forecasters are predicting an overall GDP growth of 2.5 or 2.8% in 2014. Continuing to confound many of those who oppose the actions of the Fed and the administration, core inflation remains less than 1.8%, and with a 50% reduction in the barrel price of oil since July, there appears to be little to alter this positive trend for the rest of this next year of 2015. Almost 4 million new jobs were created in 2014. That's the largest job growth since 1999. Unemployment on the national level in November 2014 stood at 5.6%, and if the continued growth in employment is extended through 2015, it may fall to between 5 and 5.2%. The combination of these factors has been widely accepted as positive news on both Main Street and Wall Street. Consumer sentiment is strong, and despite a weak Christmas startup sales, the last quarter of retail sales particularly strong in communities such as Macomb County. Many stores enjoyed their best Christmas in 4 years. Before the new year, the stock market registered a new economic high, and despite some recent volatility, the 2014 annual gains were over 7%. The real surprise has been the strength of the long-term bond market. This may be driven by the comparative strength of the U.S. economy. While Europe appears entering a recession and perhaps a period of deflation, and the Japanese economy continues to stagnate, and even the Chinese economy's growth lessens, the American recovery has generated a surge of value of the United States dollar and an international migration of overseas investors into U.S. Treasury bonds, American real estate, and other investments which have strengthened domestic growth. All of this has had substantial impact on a variety of national economic issues. The federal deficit, which has been substantially reduced since 2010. In 2010, the federal deficit was about 10% of the gross domestic product. Now it has been reduced to less than 3% of the gross domestic product. In many states and communities who have progressive forms of local revenue generation, there's been a growth in the real value of revenue coming to those communities. The housing industry starts and home sales continue to grow in 2014, and that trend should continue through 2015. So it's not hard to predict economic growth on the national level, and most of those developments will continue to fuel recovery from Macomb County, the Detroit metropolitan area, and the state of Michigan. In particular, these national trends will aid in the reinvention of post-bankruptcy Detroit. However, while it's important to recognize these positive developments, the recovery has not brought our economy back to pre-2008 levels. Indeed, the expansion of the American domestic auto industry, the principal local, regional, and state driver of our economy, might begin to reach its limits in sales and market penetration by the end of 2015. Further new investment, particularly in the form of overseas auto supplier relocations to the Detroit metropolitan area, seem less likely as the strong dollar will continue to challenge foreign investment and American exports. While it is significant that Detroit's bankruptcy has been resolved, the ability of the city to sustain a growth pattern which will prevent the duplication of the financial crises of that bankruptcy in the first place are not at all settled. Moreover, there are some factors of disinvestment, poverty, and the lack of revenue will now haunt many of the inner ring suburbs, including cities in Macomb County, which are bordering on similar economic issues as Detroit. With little help from the state anticipated, even though there will be local expansion of the economy through 2015, the economic future in the coming years remain considerably uncertain. So what does the economic future of Macomb County hold? While it's uncertain, it's not without potential, given the vision, the leadership, and the ability to collaborate resources the future can be exceedingly bright past 2015. Indeed, Macomb County can play a role in the new form of suburban development, which will challenge all of us to think way beyond our usual framework. So, with that kind of introduction, let me try to spend a little time talking about some of the trends and how they fit within this kind of analysis. Again, we can start on the national level and work through this rather quickly. As I mentioned, the economy on the national level has really begun to pick up substantial steam in 2014, and many of the hard decisions which were made by Congressman Levin and others on the federal level are now paying off in a number of very important ways. Obviously, we talked about some of those trends, but let me just highlight a couple of other ones. Not only has the job growth been impressive, but for the first time we're starting to see wages begin to grow, which means you couple with that wage growth with the lowering cost of energy through the lowering price of oil. There is now a growth in disposable income in the United States, which is going to fuel consumer demand for products like automobiles and other products that are made or manufactured in these communities. Just yesterday, Christine Lagarde, who's the head of the International Monetary Fund, kind of put it really well. Looking around internationally, the United States is the only economy that appears to have weathered the storm of the Great Recession and continues to grow. That doesn't mean that major issues are still need to be addressed. Our productivity, particularly since 2005, has not grown has grown under 2% a year, which is very low compared to since the post-war period of over 3.2 to 3.5%. We have significant economic inequalities which continue to change and develop the kinds of consumer markets that we face. The broad middle class, which served as a broad consumer mechanism for many, many products, has now been bifurcated into a growth in the upper end of the income and also a growth in some lower income segments. That issue needs to be confronted on both a national level and a local level as well. And finally, and probably most important for us in Macomb County, the labor force participation. The amount of people in the workforce has actually declined in the last 7 or 8 years. And that's an important and troubling sign on a national level because our growth, our value of our products is really based around a large number of people working. And without that, the society suffers. But still, on the national level, we are doing exceedingly well. But for the 5th year in a row, our local economy actually exceeded some of the national growth patterns. Again, the main reason for this has been the consistent positive growth of domestic auto sales. This year, although full figures are not in yet, automobile sales should be about 16.4 million units. That's only 1 million units less than the record high in 2004. For those of you who, say, well, it's a million less, in 2010, at the height of the recession, there were less than 10 million vehicles produced. So this growth is very, very significant in a relatively short period of time and is the major reason why the county continues to grow and develop. 2 other very important points, though, about Macomb County in this period, which fuel our growth, is one, the consistent growth of population in the county, of young families moving in, both from Detroit and new Americans. And as some of you know, in terms of counties in the United States, this county now serves in the top 10 counties in the country with the numbers of refugees coming from other countries, in particular, of course, the Middle East, to the United States. So our population growth is very, very important, and it's important for the long-term economic reasons. On the state level, we see that growth reflected in a number of ways. The good news is that the state job picture has also increased. Over 40,000 new jobs have been created, mainly in automobile expansion. We've also seen that the resolution of the Detroit bankruptcy has lowered the risk of investment in the state and in the metropolitan area, and that's very, very positive. Some troubling news. Recently, the general fund allocations in the state show a revenue shortfall of about $450 million. In other words, the tax cuts introduced 4 or 5 years ago haven't produced the revenue, the economic growth in revenue, which will be a certain challenge. But I know that there are lots of state legislators here who will solve that problem for us. There really is an enormous opportunity and challenge on the state level. And I'll just kind of talk about it in very vernacular forms. It was a very curious legislative session last year. We saw the raising of the minimum wage from $7.40 now up through in July 2018 to $9.40. We saw the legislature allocate $195 million to support the grand bargain in the Detroit bankruptcy. Both things very positive, very difficult to get through, and very surprising in many ways. On the other hand, we also need to look at the question of the roads and what happens with the roads and the proposal on the roads, and also, I would argue, the construction of the new bridge to Canada. The resolution on the state level becomes very, very important in many ways for our local activities. Here's some data on employment gains in auto. You can see that in the recovery in auto for the state of Michigan means a 35% increase in jobs in the auto industry. For those of you who are going tonight to the auto preview or have gone to the auto show, there's a great schizophrenia that exists now in the auto industry. You have kind of, if you go around the different exhibits, you'll see on the one hand a great emphasis on power, on cars that will have 600 horsepower, on great sports cars, etc. On the other hand, you'll also see green. So there's a kind of schizophrenia of the industry, the question of whether performance trumps environmental issues becomes a real key question for future growth of that industry. But what unites them together, and this is important for us to keep in mind in Macomb County, is that what's uniting both of those trends is the fantastic expansion of information technology, both within the automobile and in the relationship of the automobile to superstructure issues, roads, et cetera. That increasingly, you'll see we're coming closer and closer to driverless vehicles. And the Center for that research, the Center for that development, the Center for concern around that in cyber technology can very well be in this community. Which then leads me now to talk a little bit about Macomb County. First, some good news on the figures. This is we're settling into a new normal. That new normal does show some very big progress in terms of jobs inside of manufacturing and construction, what we would call sustainable job levels, jobs that pay between $20 an hour and more. We're at the high point in terms of our recovery, but as you can see, taking the point where the employment was the highest in Macomb County, right at the point of 1999, 2000, then looking at the trough in 2010, that our growth has consistently increased since 2010, but yet not as significant as it was in 1999. So we're moving up, and we're moving up slowly, unfortunately, but you can see we have a kind of U-shaped recovery. We wish it was V-shaped, but U-shaped means that we're making steady progress. It still, though, means that our progress will probably not reach the points that you see in the early parts of this slide. Here's some figures on employment gains, and yes, good news, unemployment as a percent has declined. Other good news, that the labor force is now returning to almost the same size it was in earlier 2010. On the other hand, there's still a significant amount of people who are out of the labor market. That if you look at our population and the population growth of the county, that has not been reflected in the employment growth in the county. And a question of why this is so. Even when companies and institutions, hospitals, schools are hiring, where is the disconnect? And while the data is not all that clear, some of that disconnect, I think, has to do with numbers of older workers who were laid off or dislocated as the result of the Great Recession who have still not been absorbed. This question of the mature worker, the person who may have worked for 20 years, been laid off, coming back to work, finding it very difficult to work, is a particular problem in communities like Macomb County. While we don't have good data on it, I can share with you a Department of Labor study which indicated that among dislocated workers who were dislocated between 2011 and 2013, if you were between age 25 and 54, 68% of those people were reemployed. However, between the age 55 and 65, only 50% of those people were reemployed. And for those individuals over 65, less than 20% were reemployed. So the age questions and what we do with mature workers becomes, I think, an important question for us in the future. Still, very major county bright spots. A number of different kinds of growth, both in the industry side, but also on the commercial side. The opening of successful stores in the mall in Roseville was a particular interesting development this year. General Motors bought the Campbell Ewald building on Van Dyke and is now putting in between 800 new workers into that facility. The Wayne State building, which Ahmad just talked about, brings a new post-secondary institution. And let's not forget the Chaldean Foundation's building on 15 Mile and Ryan and Sterling Heights, 12,000-foot facility, which is going to serve the new refugees, about 400 refugees each month coming from the Middle East. The planning department has done an incredibly good job during this process, shepherding a number of projects. You can see them here, the projects, the jobs retained, and you can see growth. I do want to highlight one particular activity which many of us have certainly supported and worked with. That's the Oakland University Business Incubator Velocity, working with the City of Sterling Heights and the Macomb County Economic Development and Planning Group. This incubator has really focused on a couple of the major priorities of the county, and one of them being cybersecurity. It's been very active working with the Michigan Defense Center, developing real expertise in that area. So what we're seeing is a focal point of that incubator becoming very important for a future growing technology. And this, I think, again, very much highlights a process that we're going through in the county, which is not just having a number of resources, but focusing those resources, leveraging them together, and achieving some economies of scale as the result of that. On the housing area, Macomb County residential sales have continued to increase. That's a good news. Zillow reports 11% increase in median home values. Still, about 20% of the housing in the county is, quote, underwater. That is, its value is less than it was when it was first purchased. But foreclosures and the kinds of disruptions in housing that occurred earlier on in the Great Recession have dropped considerably. City of Sterling Heights, for example, reports that foreclosures have dropped 50%. And not only have housing sales gone up, but residential building permits continue to rise. In fact, out of the 10 communities in southeast Michigan that have the most residential permit growth, 4 of those top 10 are in Macomb County. And that's certainly good news. Macomb Township leads the way with over 445 new residential building permits and new subdivisions in the county and new kinds of subdivisions. Subdivisions with mixed developments with both housing, apartments, small stores become, I think, very important new ways in which the suburban development occurs. The bad news is that many of that housing starts, and a lot of the concentration of that is really in a band between 20 Mile Road and 26 Mile Road, and creates a kind of potential housing bubble where increased property values in those areas and increased sale prices in those areas will result in overvalued real estate if there's any dip in the market. But on the whole, the housing area is clearly much more positive than before, and it's resulting in projected residential tax assessments that will increase in most of the communities. However, you know, for those of you who look at those figures and find your house or find your community and wonder, oh my God, my taxes are going to go up 13.5%. The Headley Amendment limits the increase to the rate of inflation, which is about 1.6 or 1.8%. So you don't worry. Which means for those of us who are in the education sector, we don't cover all those funds. Median household income, however, still has a long way to go. Part of this reflects the fact that there has been significant income changes over the last 20 years, which results in large numbers of lower income people moving into the county, and the gap between Macomb County and some of the other counties continues to grow. However, if you look at where we were in 2010 in things like a number of people who are on any form of public assistance, the number of clients served by Michigan Works, these figures indicate that there's a softening in some of these areas. Recovery has made a difference. When you ask the question, and where did some of the people who have dropped out of the labor force gone? Here's an example. These are aged 18 to 64 SSI recipients who are receiving some form of disability, Social Security disability. You can see that growth in the county in a consistent pattern, doubling in 7 years. That's a sign that, again, individuals are dropping out of the labor force, which has, again, an impact of impeding growth. And this issue of, the decline of workforce participation is a significant one for the economy as a whole and for the county. Many of you have been active over the years in food distribution and food pantries. You can see here a little bit of a decline. That's primarily due to the fact that, at least on the county level, the amount of money that has been allocated for food distribution has declined, so that the programs have declined. Food stamp participation has declined about 8% in the county over the last year, again, reflecting some economic growth. Probably the most interesting and long-term impact has been on the affordable health care legislation. And here again, just to give you a sense of this, in 2011, before the act was implemented, it was estimated that about 100,000 people in the county were uninsured entirely, about 12% of the county. If you look at the initial signups over the first year, and increasingly this year, in Macomb County alone, over 70,000 individuals, or almost 70% of that 100,000, have now been placed in some form of health care coverage. On the state level, the health care coverage has been really very phenomenal. The original projection was 475,000 people would sign up. That was exceeded up to 496,000 in the first year. This year, the figures which are still coming in has Michigan at an additional 290,000 people. So that's 600,000 people out of a state that has about 9 million population. But most importantly is not only are individuals insured, but what that does to healthcare systems. When individuals come with insurance, that means that there are less cases of people who are not paying at all, which means those institutions like McLaren, institutions like Henry Ford Hospital, are able to divert those monies that would have gone into paying for the, quote, charity cases to utilizing them to local community activities. A very important group, which many of you know, run by Judge Linda Davis, Families Against Narcotics, receives money from hospitals as the result of them being able to displace those funds because they're not needed because of the healthcare legislation. So that transfer of monies really results in some positive growth on the local level for us in the county. In the long run, this is still a work in progress. There are lots of details that we have no time to get into now. But on the whole, the impact of affordable health care will play a significant role in the future development of the county. So we have a new normal. And there's some really good news about that new normal. The continued success of the positive image of the county grows. I mean, on many different levels. I mean, you know, we joke about, you know, Mark's role, but it's more than just Mark now. I was at an event yesterday where a new federal manufacturing center was opened up in Detroit, and who does the honor guard but the Vietnam veterans from Roseville. We play a role in every now part of metropolitan life. That, I think, really will help develop the success in the county. Now, what are some of the challenges? Some of the challenges come back to some of the data that we've just seen. The county is growing. We have larger numbers of lower income people coming to us, and they're coming to us with needs. The traditional suburban communities that were established through the 1950s and 60s that produced all the kinds of different cities and geographical lines that we see in Macomb County, that format is much, much more difficult to handle the needs of many of our new residents coming into. So the challenge is how we develop new ways, new forms of handling the needs of the people in the county. And I think that's the kind of and the good news about that is that we're right precisely at the point where city and suburban relationships can really be altered to take into account those challenges. So the new normal will be, what do we see the relationship between Macomb County and other counties and Detroit? What are some of the issues which exist after bankruptcy? And let me talk a little bit about this and drill down a bit, just to keep in mind. Bankruptcy has certainly, the resolution has certainly helped the entire metropolitan area. But the resolution doesn't necessarily mean that the issues facing Detroit have been solved. For example, the plan is not just for the city to emerge out of bankruptcy, but where is the growth going to come from? In the city's plan approved by the judge, there's a $483 million of new revenue forecast by the city's plan for growth of the city of Detroit. The city of Detroit has 4 major sources of income. income tax, property tax, revenue sharing from the state, and surprisingly, tax from gambling, which is now 16% of the income of the city of Detroit. If you look at the first three, revenue sharing is clearly diminished, property taxes have clearly diminished, income taxes have increased a bit. So the question about the growth of the city and where that revenue is going to come from becomes very, very important. It's important because growth cannot be achieved at the expense of the suburbs, but it has to be achieved, in a sense, in conjunction with the suburbs over the areas that we see as mutual gains. So collaboration becomes extremely important. It becomes important from a city suburban perspective. And two areas that are worth looking at in some detail is, first, as part of the city bankruptcy resolution, the water board was now which was run by the city of Detroit, has now turned into the Great Lakes Water Authority. Macomb County is represented on that, along with Oakland County and Wayne County. And the issue of what we do about the water system becomes now not a Detroit issue, it becomes our issue. And as Mark Heckel has rightly said, the original resolution of this to deal with the bankruptcy really never dealt with the issue is what kind of water system should we have? What kind of system will exist? And now we have to turn our attention to this question. Here we have a system of overcapacity. There's less water usage. The main customer, one major customer, Genesee County and Flint, have left the system. We have an old, aged infrastructure. We have data which is not clear about the future of the system. On the other hand, we do have to turn our attention to this, and our attention has to be less whether the rates of water are the same in different communities and whether cost is equivalent, to how do we develop efficiencies of scale and how do we develop ways in which the water system reflects the growth for both city and suburb. Same is true with transportation. As we develop the Regional Transportation Authority, and again, Macomb County is represented on the Regional Transportation Authority. As that authority begins to plan, it cannot just plan for transportation just for the people who currently use mass transportation, because we know there's a very small group of people who currently use mass transportation. But how can mass transportation be, quote, sold to employers, to people who work, so that it becomes efficient and certain and stable, so that it can be utilized by people in communities like Macomb County? Those questions will now become front and center for us and for us in the county. And the ability to come up with new models for how we handle these questions, I think, are going to be very, very important for us in the future. And let me just say a few words about some of that. What kind of new models of suburban, what are the characteristics of some of those new models? First, they focus on specific activities. They collaborate. They cut across geographical and governmental lines. Second, they leverage capacities. They work on projects together. Third, they work on the basis of a vision, some sort of skills and some sort of vision of what is going to be achieved. Here are some examples up here that some of you are familiar with. One Macomb, established by the county executive, is organized in the county to deal with new Americans, the needs of immigrants. It works in school districts, in the Utica schools, it works with Macomb Community College, it works in many areas with the Chaldean communities, with the Albanian communities. Its goal is to promote the county across municipalities and city lines. M3, E4M, which is the county, the college, the Michigan Works, focuses on economic development. Again, economic development in all the townships and cities. The view is that you work together to collaborate to bring things forward. Another one which is not on the slide, but a very important one which is going on right now, initiated in large part by 4 cities: Harrison Township, Sterling Heights, Clinton Township, and Mount Clemens. How can fire protection, firefighters in those communities work together, consolidate their organizations, working with the labor unions that represent the workers in those communities to develop a fire protection that cuts across those communities? Those models of cooperation really set up new models of suburban development. And it's very, very comforting on many different levels to see lots of parts of Macomb County playing a role in that. And finally, I want to just spend just a little bit of time on our center at the college, on the Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. We've come to the conclusion, and I think it's been said by a number of you as well, that we need more economic growth and activity. We cannot just depend on the present automobile industry to return to employment levels that have existed in the past. So the resources of the college are going into a new Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. We're going to be working with students, developing their skills and developing some of their ideas on the campus and communities. We also work with the Goldman Sachs Initiative with businesses who are already established so they can expand. But we've also now kind of, and are announcing a new innovation fund. We were successful. Our Board of Trustees voted to spend some of the college's money, provided that we found a match. We found a match ably from J.P. Morgan Chase, and we founded the Innovation Fund for Macomb Community College, powered by J.P. Morgan Chase. This Innovation Fund will allow companies in the Detroit metropolitan area to both achieve awards of $25,000 or loans of $100,000, provided that they have some educational opportunities for our students and will promote growth in this community. The fund will start taking applications on February 1st, and you can see up there a website that you may be interested in applying. Now, for our own forecast. Again, recovery again continues in 2015 at the national level. We're going to see, I think, significant growth. There may be some downside in communities that are heavily dependent on prices of oil, North Dakota and Texas, and some local difficulties in parts of the country. However, growth should be fairly substantial, between 3.5% GDP growth. Inflation will remain low, 1.8%. Auto sales should increase. Some are talking as high as 17 million, probably more likely 16.8 million. Unemployment should fall between 5 and 5%. And there should be substantial wage increases. That's all very positive news. That will continue in Macomb County. Recovery will probably begin to slow down by the end of 2015, as we reach a point where the domestic automobile industry has to win more market share and penetrate further into the economy. And that question of how well that happens is something that we need to look at the future. We always talk about wildcards, and I want to start with one, and I'm sure Congressman Levin will enjoy this one, whether shared governance in Washington is going to work. We now have Republicans controlling the Congress. We have a Democratic president. We have a number of issues. Everybody says they want to work together. I might have put a question mark behind that. So we'll see what happens. There's some significant questions. Significant issues before us. I think that the challenge is going to be how we work together and keep the economy moving in the positive way it's been moving. Second, the whole question of international instability, and I know what's on people's minds is what goes on in the Middle East or terrorism, et cetera. But look beneath that and look at Europe, and in particular, a country I know well, Greece. And what happens in the Greek elections and what happens to the common market has a huge impact on what goes on in the United States. And the troubling signs in our stock market in the last week have a lot to do with reactions to what's going on in Europe. And some of you who follow this stuff closely saw the Swiss franc being taken off of its normal. It was tied to the euro. Those changes in international currency are in part reflection of some real economic difficulties in Europe. And as Europe heads to a recession, that may have some impact on our growth. The strength of the US dollar, very important for exports, but also very important for imports. What it means is our dollar moves up in value. It means that competitors' goods, particularly in auto and auto suppliers, become much more likely to impact on what we do in our own domestic auto industry. How we deal with the road funding proposal, again, is a very, very important question. And as all of us know, roads are a big, big priority. The proposal that has been hammered out, and I'm sure with all due respect to the legislators here who worked hard on this stuff, is a difficult proposal to understand and may, in fact, have significant problems of even getting through our electorate. And what happens with that road proposal, I think, has an important point. We all know that the auto industry is concentrated in the Detroit metropolitan area and in Macomb County, both the issue of the bonuses, the profitability of that industry and how that's reflected in wage changes will be announced in February and March. That impact on the local economy becomes important, but also auto negotiations and the two-tier wage structure and whether that's changed or how it's changed will also affect us. And finally, and I do want to, again, emphasize this, in the short run, we have an interesting issue on the Great Lakes Water Authority. The Great Lakes Water Authority has to come up with a plan to govern itself and spend the monies that are going to be allocated to it. And that has to be done between now and, I think, July 1st. And if it isn't done, it has an impact on the bankruptcy proceedings. So this next period, 6 months, there's going to be a lot of heavy lifting done by some of our representatives here. So in closing, we have a very bright future, both on the national level and the local level through 2015. The bankruptcy threat is over. We're, I think, stronger and leaner as a region. But we have to recognize reality. And recognize reality means we don't go back to the past. We look forward. We can do things, but we have to do them differently. And we have to do them in a different way, which means no one institution, no one city, no one school, no one company can do it alone. We need to work with a vision that brings us together. And we need a civic culture, a culture which understands that the role of government can promote risk-taking and creativity, it can promote growth, and we need to develop those practices. And if we have a model, that model I just refer to you is something that occurred during the Detroit bankruptcy, and that was the putting together of what was called, the grand bargain. And again, what was the grand bargain? The grand bargain was money's coming from foundations, money's coming from the state legislatures, money's coming from major corporations, money's coming from suppliers, money's coming from individual donors. And that put together over $800 million of revenue, which made a huge difference in the resolution of it. But what was important was not just the money, it's the way in which the different parts were assembled. And I can just tell you from my own experiences being on the DIA board, I mean, it was very, very impressive how focused and collaborative and how fast things worked. Those models are something that we can certainly learn from, but we can add something. And I think this is really the strength in closing of Macomb County. We can add one other part. A lot of the grand bargain was very much top-down.
It was organized by a very small number of people who really kept that vision. What we have is the ability to organize grand bargains from the bottom up. We have a possibility of doing that in a way which promotes the input of citizens, which promotes the input of the people in this room. And if we take that path, I think our future is going to be very bright past 2015. Thank you.